Ronnie Yearwood to see where he is at.
Is he there?
Yes, he's going to be on shortly.
Five minutes.
Connect close. David, just to let you know, if people want to make a the verbal question, ask a verbal question, they just need to raise their hands, and I'll
Okay,
unmute them.
and you will unmute them.
Yeah.
That's for a verbal question. If they want
Yes.
to send a text,
If you send a text, I will put it in the chat for you.
okay. Let me see if I don't use Teams too often. I tend to use the other one, so
I mean WhatsApp,
I see, I see it there. I see the chat. I got you.
because if you want me to do it by WhatsApp, I could do that too.
No, I can see the chat here. I communicate with you in the chat.
Okay, no problem.
So when an individual is speaking, I assume that the camera will be focused on that individual rather than on everybody at the same time. Is that how it's going to work? Mm. Okay. All right. So it is just Dr. Yerba that we are waiting for now. About 5 minutes to go.
David, I'm here. I've been here ever since.
Okay.
We can't see your camera there.
We need to see you though.
Wait, 2 seconds. Let me. As I told you, this I was just putting on my face. You know, I have to look as good as you.
Peter is back.
No, Peter is not on.
All right. This is what I want to do. I will pose one question to everybody, which is inviting each of you to share your perspective on the topic at hand. And then we move from there based upon what you say. We then interact from there. I would encourage you to keep your opening comments to about 3 minutes at the most, because what you really want to try to do is to get to the point where we interact with the audience as much as possible. So I don't particularly encourage drawing out the opening of these discussions, so that 5 and 10 minute pieces, will take up quite a lot of time. So if we can get to about 3 minutes or so, that'll be fine. But each person has an opportunity, therefore, to give their perspective on how they see the particular topic that we're discussing.
And to be specific, this is risk, resolve, recalibrate, and expanding possibilities.
That is what.
That's our theme.
That's
for
the
the
theme.
week.
That's the theme for the week. It's not the theme for this discussion.
So this is Barbados the Republic, 1 year on.
Right. Yes. Caught up. We good. Don't worry. We good. I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay. And I think I'm going to come. First person I'm going to come to is Ferhana Bulbulia. You're the first person I'm going to come to. Then I think I'll come to Maisha Eitel. And then we roll it from there. So I'm going to start off from the get-go, or is it that somebody's going to introduce me? Just be clear. Okay, good. So you tell me when to go. It's now 2 minutes to go. We start at 6 o'clock. Right. Okay. Well, good evening and a very warm welcome to you As part of ICAB's week of activities, we have this panel discussion this evening looking at Barbados, the Republic, 1 year on. Our panelists this evening are Ferhana Bulbulia. She is founder of the Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies. Tamaisha Aitel, who is director of Future Barbados. Senator Gregory Nichols, who is an attorney at law and the deputy chair of the Constitutional Reform Commission. Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, a law lecturer and president of the Democratic Labour Party, and Peter Wickham, political consultant and director of the Caribbean Development Research Services, better known as CADRES. What I'm going to do is to invite each of the panelists to give their particular perspective on the topic at hand. And I will begin with you, Ferhana Bulbulia. How do you see this topic, Barbados the Republic, 1 year on?
Thank you, David, and thank you, ICAB, for having me on tonight's panel. I think this is a particularly interesting topic, particularly around the context of the discussions being had in the country right now around constitutional reform, around things like equality and inclusion. So these are all very, very important topics for me. Working in the space, working at a community level for the past 10 years, particularly as a Muslim woman, I can attest to a number of lived experiences, both as a Barbadian, as someone from a minority faith, and of course, as a woman. And I think at this point in time in our history, we are definitely at a crossroads, or several crossroads, where we're beginning to have more deeper conversations about what it means to be a Barbadian, how we take different threads of who we are and what has made us, and really shape the trajectory of our country. So I think that in light of the conversations being had and a number of different persons within society airing their views and sharing, it leads a lot to the question around, one, where are we going? How do we want this to look like in 10, 20, 100 years from now? And how we can truly shape that. I think education plays a very critical role, not just how we shape education moving forward, but how we re-educate and how we heighten a level of consciousness around topics like social justice, inequality and equality, reparations. So all of these are topics that I hope that we can continue to delve into through tonight's conversation. And I'm eager to also hear the perspectives from other panelists.
Thank you very much. Tamaisha Aitel, you are Director of Future Barbados. Explain for us exactly what is Future Barbados, because many of us may be unaware of that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamaisha Aitel. I am the director of Future Barbados, the best kept secret and now no longer a secret. We are dubbed a moonshot factory and are a hybrid think tank and incubator out of the Prime Minister's office here in Barbados. It is a vision for us to transform Barbados into the best place for the future to live, to work, to play, to dream, to do business, and to create solutions for our global problems. So for us at Future Barbados, we are a talent machine activating talent under 35. Yes, under 35. I didn't use any other words. Talent under 35 into creating solutions for some of the challenges that plague our country and essentially plague our world. So we spend every day activating talent to come up with these solutions and also implement these solutions. Our solutions blend profit and purpose, and where we try to figure out ways to access new pots of capital, bridging the world of innovation, the world of social responsibility, the world of public funding for these solutions in a sustainable way. For Barbados, the Republic, 1 year on, at Future Barbados, we think of Barbados in the next 50 years. What will those future generations be thinking and dreaming and doing in the next 50 years? We're looking at what are the jobs that need to be created? What are the spaces that need to be created? What will the Barbados that everybody wants to be look like? So that's what we do at Future Barbados, and I look forward to sharing more about it during today's discussion.
Thank you. Next, let's hear from Peter Wickham.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share perspectives in relation to Barbados as 1 year on. Frankly, I think that 1 year later, it's challenging to identify fundamental differences in terms of anything that has changed over the year. And I think that that's a good starting position. I'm not surprised, largely because I understood that becoming a republic didn't necessarily mean that anything would fundamentally change. Our governance is pretty much the same, and the expectation is that it would have continued. But there are a couple of things which I should mention, and certainly we had the swearing of a new government recently, and there was no swearing of allegiance to the Queen, her heirs and successors, and that's significant. That was something which I think that we were relieved of. The reality that we are no longer part of the British Empire, so to speak, and that we don't swear allegiance to the Queen, and that we are not part of that arrangement is something that's important, and I'm happy that that is the case. Recently, I noticed that the President was engaging in soft diplomacy. She went on an official visit to Africa. I don't think many people know this, but this was the first time that we saw our head of state in her role as a head of state. And the reality is that she could do that now simply because she is the head of state now and not the representative of the head of state or the representative of the Queen. I thought that was particularly useful because it gives us another layer of soft diplomacy that we can deploy in instances, and the place that she went to was not a place that was a challenging diplomatic effort, and essentially it means that you have an additional pair of hands that can work in your interests, and the recipient country is also happy to know that the head of state was received, and in our case the fact that the head of state is a woman, it has also helped us considerably. So that's one of the things that I thought was a change, a significant change that we noticed, which is something useful. In terms of the actual constitution, and I think this would probably be something that would be of interest to Gregory Nichols, I was quite happy that in the design of the Republic Constitution, we made careful to avoid some of the pitfalls that Trinidad and Tobago would have fallen into. Trinidad and Tobago became a republic in the 1970s, and then you had a situation in the 1990s when Aaron R. Robinson attempted to exercise powers that he believed that he still had as the head of state when he was advised to make persons who were senators ministers, and he said no. He exercised a power that he believed was left with him simply because he acts on advice, and he said that he could choose not to take the advice. I think the framers of our Republic Constitution, and I do, David, believe that we have a Republic Constitution. I reject entirely this idea that we do not have a Constitution. The framers of the Constitution were wise enough to ensure that there are levels of advice, and it is clearly defined within the Republic Constitution how advice is to be treated, and instances in which the president has no choice but to take the advice. And that, to me, is one of the innovations that our Republic Constitution has that I'm happy about, because it avoids potential problems that can be created. Because my feeling was always that once you create a situation in which there's an advisory function that would have been performed by the Queen, and you give that to a person who is elected, then you always create the potential that that person can say, well, look, if I'm elected, I'm going to use the power that I have been elected to exercise, and they can say no. So those are some of the things. The fact that we now have a president who was herself elected and not nominated by the Prime Minister in the way that the representative of Her Majesty would have been nominated, where the Prime Minister just says, I want Ronnie Yearwood, and Ronnie Yearwood becomes the Governor General. We now have a process whereby the president has to be identified and has to receive the agreement of a majority of members of both houses, which, it's not a perfect arrangement. She's not elected by a majority of the people, but I still think that that's a step away from a situation in which the Governor General is basically just chosen because the Prime Minister decides one day she wants her. So okay, those are my opening remarks, and yeah, we can let the conversation go from there.
Fine. Let's hear next from Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, the President of the Democratic Labour Party.
Good evening. Good evening, David. Good evening to the rest of the panelists. Good evening to those watching. Thank you, ICAB, for having me. I just want to, I think, start where I ended this conversation during the Republic process. As I said then, I thought the process itself was somewhat backward and wrong. I still stand by that, and I stand by that for the very reason, probably for the exact opposite reasons that Peter outlined. We do not have a republic constitution. We still have a 1966 independence constitution. The constitution has not fundamentally been changed in any way. The biggest change in the constitution has been the appointment process of the president. And as Peter pointed out, it is not a perfect process. It's not an ideal process. Essentially, I don't think it changed much about the formal appointment process because really the prime minister and the opposition leader are the starting point for selection of the president, as they would have been. Obviously, there's the additional layer of voting internally where both houses come together to do so. So essentially, when we think of the Republic 1 year on, not much particularly has changed in terms of our governance and our constitutional processes. We have a republic in name, but in terms of the substance of what a republic means, we've not yet achieved that. And if we pivot somewhat to the recent issue with the name change from Independence Day to National Day or whatever it was going to be called, you get the sense that the process of republicanism is not properly understood, or it's not being properly entrenched in the psyche and the psychology, if you like, and the culture of being Barbadian. That may take some time and that will take some work. But there's a kind of saying, when you start wrong, you end wrong. And really, the exercise that the Constitutional Commission, of which Gregory Nichols is part of, is going through now, is what we should have started with, and then we would have ended at the Republic. And one of my biggest fears really is the lack of enthusiasm for that process, is because most people feel that we've already arrived at the Republic. And there's no way around arguing against that. That's just the reality. We've arrived at the position, so why engage? My point obviously is to encourage all Barbadians to still engage in that process, because I think it's an important one, and we actually have to now shape and build out the type of republic that we want. It is unfortunate the way it's been done, but whatever, we put that aside, and we recognize that we have to now decide, what does this republic look like? What is the model? How do we go forward? What form of republic? Do we want a Senate? Do we not want a Senate? Do we want a proportional representation? Do we want to keep first past the post? All of these are the very kind of complicated governance questions that we have to answer.
So before I come to Senator
1 year on, pretty much
let me ask you before I go to Senator Nichols, what do you consider to be the pressing issues and concerns that ought to be addressed in a new constitution for the Republic?
So one of the issues that I think is pressing, that concerns me, and one that we see a lot of, is this issue of consultation. And I draw heavily on the Guyanese example and on case law from the Caribbean Court of Justice for this. Now, when you look at the Guyana Constitution, there's actually a definition of consultation, what it looks like. There are parameters set out that, telling the government when it has to consult, how it has to consult. And I think when we build up our new constitution, we should really define what that process looks like, because right now our constitution does not lend itself, or at least force the offices such as the prime minister or whoever holding offices to have to consult. Consult is a very loose term in our constitution. Literally, I could see you in the Parliament yard, shout to you and tell you that you're appointing somebody, and for all intents and purposes, under our current structure, that's consultation. Whereas in the Guyana Constitution, there are clear guidelines on what that looks like, the number of days, what you have to do, the process. It's one area that I would like to see us pay some attention to, and pay serious attention to the nature of the Senate. That is a concern for a lot of people, whether we require one, what's the process for that, and in particular, our voting system. because the reality is our first past the post system, we end up with phenomenal situations where where one party has 30 seats, one party has 0 seats, but we know the percentages at the base does not reflect that intention, so we need to reform that. So consultation, the voting system, and then we can look at things like the powers of the Prime Minister, term limits, and fixed term elections. So you just can't call elections willy-nilly. That is a power that should be taken away from our Prime Ministers as well.
Senator Nichols, Deputy Chair of the Constitutional Reform Commission.
Good evening, David, and members of ICAB and your wide audience. Thank you for inviting me here. I will caution you that I am not speaking in my capacity as Deputy Chairman of the Constitutional Reform Commission. That commission has been impaneled by Her Excellency, the President of Barbados, to listen to Barbadians and to make recommendations as to the new Constitution of Barbados. That process is not yet complete. In fact, I want to say that every day we receive no less than about 10 different submissions from members of the Barbadian public, from a lot of the various stakeholders and interest groups in Barbados as to what the new constitution should be about. So that I am not here this evening to speak about that process, because I don't want it to be said that my particular views are going to color how submissions are received. I happen to naturally would disagree with my friend Ronnie Yearwood on the whole question about what a republic is. I hear him, and we've had this discussion on another forum before, where we narrow the definition of what a republic is as to a number of constitutional and legal arrangements about how the state is structured, and believe that that is the sum of what a republic would be like. Importantly, we have a voice on an international stage as a Barbadian people, and we have been using that voice for several years now. The idea of a republic goes way beyond the political and constitutional arrangements of the state and the offices of the state. And it is important because I make this point. My dad used to make sure that my brother and I used to go down to the parade at the garrison every Independence Day. I was a cadet. I was later a Barbados Boy Scout, and I participated in those exercises, did the marches and so forth. But at some point in time, the reenactment of that exercise from 1966, November 30th, you start to question it. And when you realize that when you participate in NIFCA and then later in the community independence celebrations, you understand that you are expressing your Barbadianness, the Barbadian culture, the life we live, the way we cook food, the way we play cricket, the way we structure our music, our drum patterns in the music. There's a uniqueness about the Barbadian personality. And therefore, it is important for us, especially as we are coming into the middle of the third decade of the 21st century, to be able to articulate and speak to issues at a global level without us having the scepter of being a subject of a British monarch. And to my mind, the constitutional arrangements of the state are important, yes, and that is what we are trying to address in the constitutional arrangements. But we feel liberated that I do not have to take an oath where I am swearing my allegiance to Queen Elizabeth in March when I came back into the Senate, and to Charles and to William and George. This is not Game of Thrones where you have to bend the knee to a foreign sovereign. So the expression of who we are as a Barbadian people has no particular limit to constitutional arrangements or legal arrangements. I think that is a narrow definition of independence. That is a narrow definition of a republic. Our society as a people have begun a journey from emancipation to the political independence we achieved in 1966. We are on an onward journey, and we celebrate independence every day as a nation and as a people. And what we are trying to do is to build a society that gives our people the psychological boost, which independence and psychological independence is, to me, the most important aspect of a nation state, the attribute of a nation state, which we should celebrate. Not necessarily political grip from the colonial world, but the fact that we can stand on a world stage and have parity and to speak to speak with power and certainty on issues like climate change, the institutional architecture for international finance, how small states and sustainable development issues are being marshaled in those international channels, not as subjects of a British crown, but as Barbadians. And I think the idea of a republic is to liberate the minds and develop the people of Barbados in a way that we are no longer yoked to a colonial past. And it goes way beyond keeping it to a narrow perspective of constitutional arrangements for the state and the prime minister, etc., etc.
Let me get some reaction to what you have said and what the others have said from Ferhana Bulbulia, from the Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies, because at the outset, Ferhana, you wanted to drill down a little bit more into some important issues that you believe are critical in this march towards the Republic. Expand on that for us.
Yeah, thank you, David. So I think the place that I would start from is that our transition to becoming a republic, and I'm in agreement with the fellow panelists in saying it has given our nation that boost, where we can now represent ourselves fully on a world stage and deal with global issues from a position where we are fully independent and fully in control of our own pursuits. However, I think for me, and I think working at a grassroots level, it's important to really center the lived realities of people on the ground and the inequalities that have come out of our history and our colonial past. And these are things that we haven't yet fully grappled with. And conversations begin to emerge around things like I said, diversity, inclusion, rights. And these are all really important topics that, when we often discuss, they're conflicting sides of this coin, where we feel that the ability for someone to live their life and to be thriving in their pursuit of who they are somehow infringes on your right to do that. And I think these type of conversations that are important because this is how our systems were built. They were not built to be equal systems. And we have to understand how that is continuing to affect us today.
Can you be a bit more specific? Can you be a bit more specific about that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think is important to recognize is that up until about a year and a half ago, as a Muslim woman, I couldn't go in and get my ID without removing my hijab and removing it in a public space, right? And I've been and I am 28 years old. They're my mother, my grandmother have been forced to do that, and this is a religious way of life for many women. And this is just one example, right? For other persons, the right to be able to access healthcare in a way that is not discriminatory, right? And these are not necessarily things that are spoke to in perhaps laws because we're supposed to be non-discriminatory, but at the same time, the way that our society is built, the way that we perceive issues and perceive people, and that is a mindset that we have to shift. So I think when we talk about the essence of the Constitution, the very essence and the root of it, we're talking about everyone's ability to achieve and thrive in a Barbadian society that is accepting of differences, but accepting also of diversity. And it is challenging. I would be lying if I said it's not challenging sometimes to hear the conversations that take place where persons are discriminating, where they're discriminating in a way based on false information and false narratives, and they don't recognize how this discrimination leads to inequalities in how you pursue education, your access to financial services, or healthcare, or a variety of number of issues. So I think that is more so where my initial comments were going towards.
I'd like any of the other panelists to weigh in on this. Thank you. Who wants to take it?
I would like to jump in now if possible.
Yes, please.
In terms of we keep talking about the constitution reform and the republic 1 year on, and forgetting that there's a generation all of these decisions are being made, who do not have a say. The future generations do not have a say in what is happening now, and we are still making decisions based on archaic practices for future generations. So the world of equality and equity that Farhana is trying to dream about, a lot of us don't know what that means or that feels like, and we're still making those decisions. So we're really looking, there's a generation alive who only knows pretty much being not independent. We have grandparents and great grandparents who are still alive, who only know that lifestyle and are still in transition in their minds. They're the first fully independent generation is barely 40 right now, because, or almost 50, because of how long we've been independent. So we're still in a transition mode, but the plans for the future and the plans for what a true republic identity is based on not just consultations in a town hall, is based on people who don't exist right now, and how are we making those decisions based on things that are still traditional in their every way. That is, policy development is still based on old archaic methodologies. We have not come to the point where we've matched governance strategies with innovation strategies for taking us out of poverty. Taking us out of poverty is part of a baseline of what our future generations need. Climate change is part of the baseline of what future generations need. And it doesn't boil down to just the constitutional reform. It boils down to what are we planning beyond just this one document to make this relevant in the 100 years of what Barbados will mean in 100 years, beyond political cycle, and an identity that is of each of us, for people who don't even exist on the planet yet.
But I want to find out from you exactly how are we going about trying to reshape that, given all the structures and the hindrances that exist in our systems. How do you see us reshaping that?
That's me again. I can definitely jump in on that. It is understanding, and a lot of the work we do is understanding the processes that exist and learning from processes in other countries, in other entities and other sectors that lend to this. Why do we always think that the private sector does their thing and the public sector does their thing and civil society does their thing, when there are generations of people who are born to know only the TikTok world, only the Twitter world? We can learn from people who've been trying to break boundaries for many years and not looking at our systems, looking at how our bureaucracy is shaped. And I know this is an accountant forum. What are new financial models that we can build? Not new boxes to put us into, but what are moldable, pliable, feasible things that we can do, that we can predict? We've gone through a pandemic, we've gone through a volcano, we've gone through, there have been wars in our recent time that are currently happening day to day. We know all these exogenic shocks that are happening. There must be some way for us to look at our systems and look at the people who have been innovating within and outside of other systems and create those processes. It is old Commonwealth law, but law, we've all been in this place where law is sometimes a gray area. So where are those gray areas? Where are the black and white areas? Do those black and white areas need to remain in this dichotomy? Why do we keep existing in a dichotomy? It is the questions that we ask ourselves every day. And being willing to fail in that process is important. And figuring out, oh, this may not work, but giving us flexibility in that process, in designing new policies to be like, okay, rather than in 10 years, we're going to check on if this works. Let us see if this works in 18 months. Let us see if this works in 3 years. Let us see if this is a 6-month feasibility study we can do. The work I do is a lot of experimentation, and we learn from science and data a lot. The experimentation methodology is there. It's tried and true. Let's test it. Let's create the ecosystems to test and being okay with failure, because failure at the end of the day is about making sure the citizen at our core will make a solution better for the citizen at the core in the end.
Thank you very much. Peter, when you go back to something like the 1998 Constitution Review in Barbados, one quote is, we were told that there is too much centralization of government and too great a concentration of power in the hands of the Prime Minister, too little accountability, both by public officials and parliamentarians, a pressing need to shore up the citizens' basic rights, to strengthen the independence of the judiciary, and to isolate the public service from political interference. That was back in 1998. We are now on the march of being a republic. The question is, to what extent are these observations as relevant today as they were back then? And how do you see Barbados addressing those? Because to many people, these are essential elements also of being a republic. Your thoughts? You may be muted, Peter. I'm not hearing you.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was saying I agree with you. All of those issues are relevant, and indeed, a lot of the issues that Ronnie raised in his presentations are relevant. I think that they're questions of democracy. The Westminster system gives the Prime Minister way too much power. And I think that we need to use these opportunities to bring a lot of that into check. And there's simple things like the imposition of term limits, which I support, the imposition of a fixed date, which I support, which would have to check the power of the Prime Minister. So I agree that all of those observations are important. I'm very concerned about fundamental rights in the erosion.
You slipped out again. I think you've gone
Sorry,
on mute again.
Yeah, I touched the keyboard. Yeah, my apologies. Right. No, I think that for example, when I hear the challenges that Muslim women face, with the wearing of the hijab in public places, and things like taking pictures with the ears exposed, those issues, a lot of them we've started to deal with them. But I think that the challenge in Barbados is that there was an assumption that it was not okay to ask, and that it was improper for a Muslim woman to ask if she can continue to wear her hijab in a place where she's taking pictures and things of that nature. So I think that it's great that we're having these conversations and all of these issues are being addressed. At the same time, however, as a political analyst and one that has been involved in this process across the region for the better part of 20 years, I understand that it's a challenging issue to look at these things in summary. So you look at the situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where there was a proposal to go towards a republic and to include many of these changes. Certainly a lot of them weren't as fundamental as they should have been, but nonetheless, there was an admission that we needed to look at power of the Prime Minister. They wanted to do things that they wanted to constitutionally guarantee the right to hang people and so on, which I have problems with, but nonetheless, that was the will of the people at the time, well, the will of the government at the time. And it was stopped, because there were many Vincentians who did not believe that they needed to become a republic. And there were several myths, and I had made a list of some of the myths that came up in the republic conversation, like the fact that people from the UK would start coming to Barbados, like the fact that we would be kicked out of the Commonwealth, like the suggestion that we, with people who were withdrawing UK pensions, would have those pensions stopped, or that it would create unfriendly relations with the United Kingdom. Now, the challenge has always been that these myths and these peculiar ideas stop people from saying, well, let's look at the fundamentals. And that's the reason why I absolutely love the strategy that we have adopted in Barbados, where we have said, let us get the basic thing out of the way. Let us become a republic. Let's become a republic by using the least offensive means possible, which is amending the constitution just to create that facility to make us into a republic. Then we can start to deal with the slightly more challenging issues once we've gotten all of these myths out of the way. So no one can come and say that the reason that the Prime Minister wants to become a republic is to give herself more power. Because we have a situation in which we are already a republic, and you can basically see that nothing much has changed. So strategically, I think what we have done is the correct way, because I've seen Grenada, where the process got thwarted. I've seen St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where the process got thwarted. And I've seen Antigua, where the process hasn't even started, because something as simple as a Privy Council, they couldn't get people to agree on it with a majority. So I appreciate that these things are important, and I am anxious to look at the fundamental issues, all of which have been raised today. But I think it is important to do that once you get this niggling question of whether we can or cannot out of the way, by saying, let's do it by the simplest means possible, prove to people that all of these myths have no basis in reality, and then we can start dealing with the substantive issues.
Before I come to Ronnie Yearwood and to get the comments also of Senator Nichols, I just want to remind those of you in the audience that you can participate. You can send either voice notes, send us texts, or you can speak directly. So you've heard Peter's assessment here of the challenges that remain, which I've identified coming out of the 1998 exercise. Ronnie Yable, what are your thoughts?
I just want to address what Farhana was saying before. And what strikes me is the argument there is not so much for a republic, but for a just society. And the question I guess you can ask is, do you need republicanism in whatever form we choose to achieve a just society, or do we build that just society and understanding that we're doing so? Because all the things that Farhana was talking about per se have nothing really per se. Some of them are connected, and I don't want to be putting words in your mouth or anything, but I'm understanding some of them are definitely connected to the constitutionalities and the law and all those other things. And I think Tamisha was saying the same thing, but a lot of them are connected to the type of Barbados that we're trying to shape up. Yes, the republicanism view is part of that, and the vision of what kind of new Barbados do we want to create, what kind of Barbados do we want to create for the now, and the things that we build in to create the Barbados for the future, you know, for my son and for his grandchildren and so forth and so forth and generations on. And we can understand that the Republic argument and the republicanism move is part of that vehicle. But really, sometimes I think we're looking at two different things, and we're looking at Republic in its strict sense of what are the legal and the constitutional things that make us a republic, and what does that look like, the things that Peter was talking about, the type of governance systems, etc. And then the other question is, what type of Barbados do we want to create? What does that society look like? What does justice mean in the Barbadian sense? What does the Bajan dream look like now, as opposed to, say, the Bajan dream looked like in the 1980s, etc.? Now, coming on to what Peter was saying, I think Peter and I have had this debate ad nauseum, and I'm not going to revisit it upon anyone here. We just disagree on the approach to this. But to say where we are now deserves, we've done it, it's over, and there's no point reliving that debate. But to say where we are now, it is just, I want to encourage all Barbadians to really participate in this process and try to shape out from a political side and a constitutional side the type of Barbados that they want to live in, because that lends itself to what Farhana was talking about, that concept of justice and all the other things, the connection, so that you can bring those kind of two debates, if you like, and those two discussions together. Because all of the things that we want to talk about, a good society, what is justice, what are rights for women, what are new rights generally, what are rights surrounding sexuality, what are rights surrounding gender, what are rights surrounding race, all of these things can be part of our discussion of a republic and a new constitution. So really, we are where we are, and I say that kind of unapologetically. It's not the choice that I would have chosen, but that was a choice of the government, which also demonstrates the kind of tremendous power that our prime ministers, and I'm not talking about a prime minister, I'm just talking about the office of a prime minister, that our prime ministers have in doing these sort of things. And perhaps that's a good signal and example for how do we go forward in terms of addressing the powers of the prime minister. And speaking to what you mentioned about, David, that decentralization of power, and what does that look like in terms of decentralizing power to our communities? I am not.
Do you have any thoughts on it, though?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm not necessarily an advocate of local government. I don't feel that we need more layers of government. We don't need additional government and the additional cost of that. But what I'm an advocate of the development of local services. So we need to build out our services at the local level, which function as the government at the local level. So better polyclinics, libraries, better post offices, local banks, walk-in clinics for women, perhaps. All of these things, and I'm sure some of these are the ideas that others on the panel will be thinking about, and we build that out at the local community level, and that's how you get that kind of engagement at that level. But I'm not necessarily
Senator, do you see that touching on this issue of ministerial power, accountability? How do you see that approach really touching those particular concerns?
David, as a student of politics for a long time and practitioner in it, at every stage in any political society, the leader of the political party or the political institution that is at the head of government will attract criticism. We have had at least 7 or 8 changes of government since we've introduced free and fair elections in Barbados since 1951. We have never had a situation where Barbadian people feel that the results of the poll do not reflect the wishes of the people on a consistent basis. There are some Caribbean countries which do not have changes of government, and there is a lot of consternation where one-seat majorities are the order of the day after successive elections, where the election is fought in some other countries along a certain corridor, where the majority of the people living in other parts of the country do not matter, right? So that I separate this whole question about too much concentration of powers in the hands of the Prime Minister, because on the other side of the spectrum is having a broad plebiscite where the government does not have the ability to effectively govern and make decisions for the country. We see that happening in countries like Italy, where we have a proportional representation system, where they have had in the last 75 years, 80-something different governments, and every year there is a change of leader, because on the basis of the political backroom games that have to be played out in order to keep and cobble together a majority. So I don't get too excited about these criticisms. Barbadians go out and vote for governments when they think that the government needs to be changed. We don't have a problem in Barbados. Our democracy is very strong and very alive in Barbados. So we must not overstate the political misfortunes of one group of people in society to mean that all of a sudden our democracy is the worst thing in the world and needs to be changed from top to bottom, and bringing all sorts of institutional changes that will now make practical governance in the country unworkable, because a government is feckless, it is not able to operate. I like to separate those political arguments from the practical. Bajans change governments, you put down the people things and come out the next day where you get voted out. Barra lost, Queen's lost with Bree St. John, Winata lost, Fernand Stewart lost, and the Barbados Labour Party will not be government forever. There will be a time when Bajans will change that. In fact, there are some Caribbean countries, David, where the government is changed every election. But the people make that decision. So we must not, in my view, try to prescribe things to ensure that what is in my mind a political deficit that I can't overcome. Let us institutionalize it by prescribing a change to the law, because I can't overcome a political deficit, so I need to have the constitution changed to deal with the deficit that I cannot overcome.
How do you address the issue of greater accountability within the Republic?
David, that is something that we have to continue to strive to work towards, and I am myself, I'm not pleased with the level of what we call disdain for the certain standard principles of governance, and accountability is one of them. The fact that public agencies are not penalized for not reporting on financials and providing other financial statements, management reports, and that kind of stuff. That is where the thing is broken down. And we live in a small society, and we have to be careful that we are not pointing fingers at people who are just the fall guys for larger things, deficits in our way in which we manage the governance of the country. But accountability is something that we have to agree that we will strive on. And I know that this ICAB has submitted, or has indicated it will submit recommendations to amend the Constitution or alter the Constitution, because that chapter in the Constitution which speaks to finance and has never really had a lot of work in it, and I'm looking forward to us having that. David, I just want to say one thing. I saw a submission coming in terms of restore and right and freedom of the environment, and giving the environment protection within the Constitution. That is something new and very novel, but it's still something very vitally important when we talk about Barbados being one of those small island developing states that is very susceptible to climate change and the shock that we see from climate catastrophes and so forth. These things that we are speaking about in terms of the governance of the country we are not going to get it right at any one point in time. We are going to have to live through a period where we continue to make changes that are necessary to improve the lot of Barbadians and to improve Barbadians' standing in the international community and to allow Barbadians to be able to step onto the international stage without looking behind shamelessly at what we have had, right? So that is an ongoing project, and Barbados is worth, to my view, working towards building out a better, fair Barbados, and as Ronnie said, the good society. And that is what we are in this for. So, but I just figure that let us not overstate the amount of political changes that we have to make to a constitution, because a lot of what we need to reform from a constitutional perspective, as some of the other commentators have said, is even go way beyond the tinkering with what I call trying to account for political deficits and by making changes to the political structure. That is what we need to guard against, in my view.
Tamaisha, I wonder whether you can share with us what you have been hearing from the younger people in this community that you've been working with as you look towards the future.
The talent under 35 is what I like to call us. So as we're having this discussion, what we pin ourselves a lot of, we are smaller as a country than Starbucks as a company. So a lot of young people think we detach ourselves from governance and government relations because it just gets overly convoluted and separate, and you don't feel engaged and involved. And so we're trying to figure out systems where at the end of the day, will they help us pay our rent better? Can we be able to get a mortgage? Can we get a loan from the bank? That's what consume our everyday conversations. And how are we building in a country? How are we living in a country that will allow us to just live day to day, month to month, year to year? And that's what the young people are talking about. The governance systems, I'm not going to a constitutional town hall meeting in the night. That's just a fact. We don't feel engaged upon in the circles that we engage in. I don't think there's a consultation on Discord for youth under 18. I don't think that's where people are talking to you. So that disconnect has not been there. There are the few who participate, but there's a majority who don't, because you don't see that connection to your everyday life and to your future. Partly because we have not grown in an education system that has given us this civic responsibility at our core. And partly it's because your everyday life and your everyday concerns, governance and government, seems as such a beast that you just don't want to deal with most of the time. And so a lot of the times it's as simple as, why do I have to wake up in the morning and go stand in a line to go get something done when I can really go online and click a button and get it done? We're talking about accountability earlier. Young people would quicker go online into a digital space where they can see something and provide their comments and feedback than stand up in a line or write a cabinet paper or write the letter to the editor in the newspaper, because that's the way you engage and that's the way you get things across, and that's the way the grassroots movements happen, and that we have seen success happen. So for me, it is for me and some of the conversations I have been in, it is things are made more complicated than they really need to be, and there must be other ways of doing things. So how do you connect to us? Talk to us in the spaces that we exist.
Hannah?
So I also work with an organization called Report Barbados, where we poll young people on varying issues, and we power this through social media. And interestingly, 64% of young people who would have taken the poll around the process of constitutional reform, and even to the extent of Barbados becoming a republic, indicated that they didn't really fully understand what rights and responsibilities they were afforded under the current constitution, and didn't fully understand processes of governance and even decision making within the country. So given that figure, where you have just over half of the population of young people, and this is young people between the ages of 13 to 29, who don't understand the process, how then can we engage in that process when we simply don't understand it, right? And I think that is quite telling to the fact that when young people are given positions to influence or sit at tables where is that experience or that knowledge coming from? Where is that background coming from? And I think what Tamaisha was saying around becoming detached, a lot of the times when we told young people, it's not about the political process. Essentially, it's more about the issues and how are we actually going to create tangible change and tangible progress. And what young people have also found is that when we do advocate, we are met with very rigid systems. And young people in a sense are not in their thinking. We found that younger persons, secondary age students, they have a perspective of the world where things can change. But as we begin to pull older persons, young persons now moving out of you in that middle age, that perspective change where it is these are the systems that we've inherited, and it's very difficult to change these systems. So we're moving young people through a society where they have ideas, where they want to be innovative, but then by the time they reach their mid-20s, they're stuck in a system that they recognize they really have no power and control in, just essentially because of how rigid the system is. Right? And I think Tamaisha can probably attest to this, and I can attest to this. Even simple things in bringing new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking about issues. Sometimes it's very difficult to get over that first hurdle to effect that change.
Okay, well, let's refer to a text message that we have here. This person says that the idea that the Republic is good is agreed by Barbadians. The way it happened, people basically felt left out, and this was an error. They say it has created a lackadaisical mood. Barbadians feel browbeaten. Mr. Nichols' suggestion that we are being too tied to the monarchy is so moot, as we all agreed we were needing to sever those ties and move into total self-determination. But that agreement stands on the precept that self-determination is about the will of the people. So how do you get that? The will of the people to be well represented must have structure to ensure some of the people are not marginalized. The writer goes on to say that the current ways of doing things suggest that people can be marginalized, and exactly because there are no procedural guides, we have lost time that could have been nation building time had it all been done systematically. They go on to say a bit more, but I think we get the gist of where that person is going with that comment. Peter, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, basically what the individual is saying is that unless we had a referendum in which we could vote, we don't feel as though we are consulted. And I've heard it several times during the whole conversation that people felt we should have had the opportunity to vote on it. I think that was a position that the Democratic Labour Party took as well, that we should have had a referendum in which we should vote on whether we want to become a republic or not, because it's important that we be consulted. I am very skeptical about the referendum, and I am skeptical for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, that I have seen the ways in which referenda have been completely distorted. And I think the best example we have is the referendum of the United Kingdom to come out of the European Union, which received the support of a majority of persons who the next day went to Google what exactly is the EU. And I am fearful of a situation in which we say to people, okay, no, I agree that we all should have the right to be involved. But to me, the question of us becoming a republic was such a simple matter. Should Farana Balbulia be able to become president, head of state of Barbados? If we agree that she should, then there's no question as to whether or not we want to become a republic. Right?
Well, can I introduce this, Peter? Because I think it's critical to make contact with the charge that is made by the writer. They say it has created a lackadaisical mood because Barbadians feel browbeaten. The issue here now is if that is indeed a feeling among a number of people, how do you work to change that
Yeah.
effect?
And I don't agree with the writer that it has created that mood, because the point is that the mood in the United Kingdom that has been created by a decision, which was a poor decision made by people who were ill-informed, has created a different kind of mood, a mood of complete dissatisfaction with the economic situation, and we could continue. So I don't necessarily know if I agree with that person that it has created any lackadaisical mood, because, as I said, if you bring the issue down to its simplest terms, should Farana Babule be able to become head of state of Barbados or not? We were in a situation before where she could never have become head of state of Barbados, and King George's son would have, right? Regardless of what happened, he would become head of state and she couldn't. When you bring it down to that simple language, then it is easy for you to say, well, let's make that bold step, and then let's work out the details after in terms of any other things that we may want to do to bring that on board. The feeling that we have been browbeaten as a people, I think is an unfortunate perception that has been canvassed in some quarters. And the reality is that it is entirely untrue. There is this feeling that people like to vote in referenda and they like to be involved in conversations. And if I look at the referenda turnout in Antigua, in Grenada, it suggests to me that people are not interested, quite frankly, because you have a referendum in which the majority of people don't even vote or participate. And then persons say they don't vote or participate because they don't understand the issues. And that was the point I had made here when Farana was speaking. Now, I appreciate that people will say, I don't understand what it is about. But yet still, I'm dealing with situations on a regular basis where persons who are well educated ask me simple things. Like when we were having a conversation about the Republic, I spoke to an attorney at law that said, but Dominica isn't a republic. I thought I heard you saying that Dominica was a republic. Dominica is a republic. And I'm saying that the fact that a person who is well educated doesn't have a clue that Dominica is a republic, I don't think it speaks to their lack of education. It speaks to the lack of interest. And I think that we live in a society in which we have our different professions, we have our different interests, people pursue them, and what people don't understand that governance is a highly technical matter in which persons who are politicians are professionals who are engaged in this process on a daily basis, and they understand things that a lot of us are not interested in understanding, and that's the reason why we have a representative government. So I take greater confidence in the ability of people to say, you know what, you make these decisions for us, because ultimately that's the reason why we voted for you, because we don't want to get involved in the day-to-day minutiae of having to get involved in a lot of these things ourselves.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Peter. Ronnie,
David, can I weigh in here? Oh, sorry, you went to Ronnie. It's fine.
I'm going to go to Ronnie and you next.
Yeah, I just want to respond quickly to what Gregory was saying about this political deficit, and I think that's a red herring. I think Gregory's trying to raise something that nobody here raised. The reality, if Peter Wickham and I can agree on on something and reforms, well, that should be a signal. It's probably something good for the rest of the country. These are not reforms that people are trying to make because they're trying to make up any political deficit. That's utter rubbish. I just want to put that on the record. These are reforms that both political parties at some point, all people across the divide, all Barbadians are advocating. I don't see how hard it is to understand that we need term limits or that we need fixed election dates. How do these things disturb and affect the governance of Barbados, or we've been governed well for this long? You know what? The reality is we can do things better. And if you're going to talk about accountability and transparency, this is part of that movement for accountability and transparency. It goes with Freedom of Information Acts. It goes with integrity legislation. It's a whole suite of things. So there's no political deficit here. So I just want to put that aside and note that these are universal things that most Barbadians want. This is just the reality. BD, NDP, FP, whatever. That's just where we are. Now, to respond to the person who sent the message and what Peter was saying, I think there is some truth to the fact that people felt left out and felt jaded by the process. And it's not necessary whether there was a referendum or no referendum. And I remember making this point, you have to find a way to engage the people. Some of us want the referendum. I was for that. I understand other people's point, did not want one. I understood that. But whatever the outcome, my essential argument was at the point of this change, there had to be some monumental engagement so that people bought into the process and didn't feel left behind. Because my concern was, and I expressed it at that point, was if you got to the end game without that engagement, when you're trying to go back to engage, to fill in the blank, so to speak, it creates problems that people may not want to be fully engaged on board because they feel, well, the process is done. What are you asking me for now? We're already a republic. If you did that, go ahead and do the rest on your own. I really don't care one way or the other. And maybe that's there's some people who would feel that way. And I don't think you can discredit or set aside their feelings. You understand where they are. And maybe you try to pull them along to say, look, we understand that's what happened. And I would keep repeating it. I am still, and I want everyone to understand, to be still fully engaged. Even if you didn't like the process like myself, you still have to understand this is Barbados. It's about what's best for the country. We're in this situation, and you try to add your voice now to ensure that we can help fill in the blank, so to speak, of what this new republic should look like, and what are some of the things that we want to ensure more accountability, more transparency, and more people involvement. Referenda have their unique problems, and we know them throughout the region and throughout the world, but they're still useful tools. There are other forms of consultation that you can use. I think Tamisha was responding to the fact, you have online engagement, petitions. For example, recently with the whole name change, I started the petition in less than 24 hours. We had about 48 hours. We had 7,000 signatures. That's a new against the name change. So that's a way that you can see that you can engage people in using the technology to reach them, as you said, where they are, because that's where a lot of people are. They're online. You try to do that, and you build up a new form of governance as best as you can, but at the same point appreciating that you can't leave some people behind. They're older Barbadians who may not want to engage in that way. So we always still have to be mindful of the society, because we're trying to bring everyone. Talk about we're building a new inclusive society. We have to somehow find a way to bring everybody along in that process.
Senator Nichols, I think you should answer this particular comment or question. It's a comment. The person says that right now, the method of the constitutional reform seems lacking transparency. You can call in with suggestions. These persons who already are not impressed with how our current governance is being handled uncomfortable. What reassurance does any citizen have that the nation will not have to continually fight the government because things have been skewed in favor of particular sectors, and therefore justice is not served in our new constitution? Going forward, they go on to suggest they leave it to those interested to turn up approach may be still not as representative of the will of the people as it might be. The person then went on to suggest that there needed to be a greater degree of outreach in trying to get the opinions of people in the schools, they say, health centers and homes and that sort of thing, because many people can't go to the centers at the times that have been allocated. And they go on to make this observation that when you want to get a serious outreach, you could do it in the same way that the election campaigns are able to go there and push what they're saying, and the politicians go all over the place at all kinds of times. So how do you see that as a criticism of the process? You're muted.
Sorry, I think it's a largely unfair criticism. The Constitutional Reform Commission has made its process very clear. We have a website. We receive submissions on the website every day. There's an interactive QR list. All forms of social media have been engaged. People are not only required to come to town hall meetings to make submissions. We have created a list. I think some people might need to mute so you don't have any such feedback from the other speakers as well. We have created a list of over 50-something stakeholders, and it grows each time. We have been encouraging all of the various civil society sectors and members and groups and organizations to make their submissions. Also, we are going out to stakeholders as well. So we are not only engaging in town hall meetings. The commission has met a number of the important office holders. We have met a number of civic society organizations which request meetings. Only last week, I had a meeting with a certain group that felt that it was too marginalized to come and say things at a town hall meeting for fear of ridicule and so forth. We have been going out there and engaging. We have a stakeholders subcommittee which makes sure that we broaden that list every time we meet, because we have a remit to make sure that we take submissions as to what a new constitution in Barbados would be. So that the notion that we are only having a couple of town hall meetings and that we are not listening to what Barbados is saying is unfortunate. I think in all forms of media, whether it be print, electronic, and in social media, you see the presence of the commission working assiduously to ensure that we meet groups. As I said, only today I received, we receive every day at least 30 emails from Barbadians across the diaspora and here in Barbados from different groups and organizations every day. We have a research assistants we have brought on so that we can start to filter a lot of these submissions down to certain core areas, so we can start to be able to map out the trajectory in terms of the conversation Barbadians are having with the commission. Our work will not end in a month or two. Our term, I think, is supposed to be 18 months before we supposed to wrap up before and then make our deliberations and make our recommendations to government, but in form of a report to the president. But we are engaging Barbados across all media, and we're not finished yet. We had sessions on Brass Stats, which has an audience of 50,000 people every day. This is not something that has been done to engage people about governance issues and about societal issues in respect of forming a new constitution before. So that if there are other fora, other media that are available, let us know. We will engage them. We've spoken about going into the schools and doing competitions, essay, debating competitions, and so forth, and quiz competitions and stuff. We had to discuss that with the schools, the unions, and the ministry, etc. We've had a rough couple of years because of COVID, and people are now settling back into schools. We didn't want to also interfere at this time with the preparations for NIFCA, Community Independence, and Christmas programming of the schools as well. So we're looking at those things next year to engage young people in the society, because one of the things that we are very clear about, this constitution will largely be the document by which my children and young people in Barbados will be governed by. So we have to really pay close attention to what they are saying, so that we are engaging. If there are means by which we can reach more people and to get people who wouldn't ordinarily come to a school hall at 6 o'clock in the evening, we will do so, and we are listening.
So Peter, I must tell you that this person isn't letting you off the hook on this matter. They say that they never were calling for a referendum on the particular matter of the move to the Republic. So we needed to be involved in the same town hall meetings and let the ideas that we have or had around the need to be a republic be aired. As we know, there is nothing that creates participatory spirit more than conversation. It is particularly disheartening when the Republic was ushered in the way it was by an experienced person in government, being no less than a former opposition leader, now Prime Minister. That action by the Prime Minister came as a slap in the face, even, according to this person, for my friends that are BLP supporters. I suppose that may tell you a lot about what support, where her support or his support may lie.
Yeah, I mean, I read the email before, and no, my views are no different, largely on account of experience. And my experience tells me that if we had a broad-based consultative process to decide whether or not we should become a republic, and to explain to people what was the difference between the status that we have now and the status that we had before, we would have been engaged in all kinds of conversations about these mythical efforts that were being made to influence people, control. This is exactly what happened in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So I'm saying, even outside of a conversation about a referendum, I do believe that the simplicity of what we have already achieved is such that if you said to people, let's discuss what it means, they are going to be of the opinion that there's something else to it. They say it can't be just that. We had a situation where in the lead up to the Republic, there was an effort being made by government to explain to people what it meant to become a republic and to deal with myths. I remember I entertained the Attorney General on Brass Stocks one day, and he fielded questions from people, some of the myths that I mentioned earlier, and he responded to them and saying, look, this is what we're going to be doing, this is whatever, and yet still the challenges were coming. And I am persuaded that there are some people who will just not be persuaded. I do, however, think it is time for us to move on and to focus on the fact that we are already a republic, and we need to start talking about how we can make our constitution better. And that's where my energies lay. And the idea that you do not have an opportunity now to engage because you didn't have an opportunity before, it just doesn't make sense. We have to move on, and we have to start talking about the important issues.
Let me come to Farhana here on this whole question of the participatory democracy. The things that you believe need to be put in place so that people can feel that they have more of a stake in the decision-making process in Barbados. How do you see it, Farhana?
I think what's important to look at when we look at participation is look at it through a lens of vulnerability, right? Who are the most vulnerable within our society? Who are the ones who are often left out? When we look at panels, when we look at the table around us, who is not being represented in a room, in a space, in a conversation? And also the power dynamics at play in that level of conversation. When we take that approach of looking at issues or decision making through that lens, then we're consistently ensuring that who is not there, we then create a space for them to be there. And sometimes it's a case where not everyone is going to be able to have a say in every single matter, right? But for constituents or people who are directly involved in a particular issue, it is important that they have a say. I think oftentimes we talk about things that we have not experienced ourselves. That's the first thing. And the second thing is often we make assumptions. So we say, I'm hearing, I'm feeling. Well, let's look at the systems that allow us to ensure that we have, for example, data-driven decisions and data-driven solutions, as opposed to just saying, this is what people think, this is what people feel. How many people do feel that way? Truly, because often conversations are dominated by persons who have the power to speak, right? And who have the power to be at tables or the ability to call in on programs and dominate those conversations. And for many persons, they don't hold that power, right? So if we think about it through that lens of who is most vulnerable, who is most at risk, who is most directly involved in experiencing a particular issue, then we go to them as experts on that particular issue, and we drive it from that perspective. So I think that's very important. I also wanted to touch on a point I think that was directed a lot at Gregory, which was around, how is the Reform Commission engaging and people feeling left out. As a young person, I know for a fact that I've seen ample messaging on social media, ample messaging on television, on radio, on the places that I'm connected around how to make inputs. It is then a choice whether I choose to engage in making inputs on that process. And I found that oftentimes we complain about the process as opposed to fully engaging in it and being a part of it. We step back and we complain about the process and nothing gets done. Whereas, you know what, these are the ways that we can engage. These are the ways that we can make our voices heard. Let us utilize that to the fullest extent. And then we have a stake in saying, has this been successful? Or has this truly reflected the vision that I would like to share?
Tamaisha, you wanted to comment?
Yes, I did. In regards to what Farhana said about who is in the room, who is at the table, and who's not there, it's also not checking boxes. And remembering that we all represent multiple identities and multiple experiences with what we do. And sometimes we forget that because we want the youth at the table. It's many times a specific type of youth who happens to have the loud mouth that we see at the table. And there are a lot of quieter voices that get missed. And how are we listening to in the silence is what's important. And we tend to miss that a lot. And the choice to engage is not an active choice. A lot of people don't have the option to engage. And whether it is the option and the vocabulary to engage in something of such a high level, whether it's the option to have space and time to engage, but we have to recognize that we've been doing a lot of work over the years. We don't lack data, data management. We don't lack the figures, we lack how to use them and how to use them in our decisions, and we lack systems talking to each other. Right now, everything is fragmented, so constitutional reform seems fragmented from everything else that's happening in our cultural, in our identity creation, in education. It seems fragmented, and that's what we tend to miss a lot. The pieces of the puzzle need to fit together. So I'm really interested in who are we not hearing from and what things are happening that we need to do better at connecting.
I'm really interested in hearing how we are going to fit these fragmented pieces together, because that is indeed a major problem in trying to solve a lot of issues in the country. How do you see us doing that?
I can jump in because this is what I do every day. So in terms of it is understanding the system. So when we did our call for talent for Future Barbados, we didn't segregate or say we wanted X degrees or we wanted Y degrees. We said apply. This is your age range. Apply. We didn't look for specific types of persons. We wanted to see who was drawn to it. And we realized certain types of marketing, everything we do is design and marketing and how we engage with people. That's how you choose what phone to buy, what clothes to buy. Certain people are attracted by certain things. And what we realized, there were some types of people missing. So a lot of what we do is trying to figure out the gaps. We do what is called compost sessions. Also kill sessions, where every idea we try to drill holes in because nothing can work. What's missing? Why can this fail? And a lot of times when we design programs, and either at the multilateral or the government level, we're copy pasting from year to year or dusting something off and bringing it back without really saying no. Let's say no to everything so we can put in the compost and create the right idea. Some things will keep working. And it means that some things you realize, wait, the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Environment actually have similar programs. Why are we not doing a better job of sharing those resources? Again, I bring it back to the Starbucks analogy. We are smaller than Starbucks. There must be a framework where our systems can talk to each other. And I'm going to harp it. Yes, I'm under 35, but the digital space has tools that exist already for us to do that. There has to be willingness and trust, however, for people to be willing to share cross-sectorally, cross-ministerially, within socioeconomically as well, and to realize that the data sharing and data conversations that need to talk to each other actually help us all at the end of the day and are not best kept secrets for our development.
Well, when it comes to the whole question of trying to get a greater sense of involvement, I go back to the 1998 Commission report, which spoke about giving people a greater voice. And at that time, there were calls for a general strengthening of the role of the Ombudsman, the creation of an Office of Public Defender, and for government to establish adequately staffed citizens advice bureaus, to which the public would have free access for advice on their rights and on means of indicating them. The question that I have for you as we look at this whole question of building the republic at that level, do you see a need for us to revisit this particular area, Peter Wickham?
No, I'm all for those kinds of things. The Ombudsman, interestingly enough, over the years has emerged as poor people's lawyer, public defender, and I think that when we restructured the Fair Trading Commission, there was public counsel included. And I think there certainly is a move towards institutionalizing that kind of support and advice to the average citizen. And I see no reason why that should not be a big part of it. I think that the ombudsman's role needs to be expanded. And clearly there's a need. I mean, you know, David, you and I sit on call-in programs on a daily basis and hear people call in to raise concerns that just really require a simple explanation. And certainly if they had access to that kind of advisory service, it would be, you know, important. So I think that that type of thing, you never see any resistance from me. And I do feel that we need more of that kind of institutionalized support to explain, help people understand, navigate administration, and to explain a lot of simple things to people on an ongoing basis.
Has it worked to date? Because
I think it has worked. It has worked to some extent. I mean, if you look at how the ombudsman operates, a lot of the work that the ombudsman does and the lawyer that works in his office is essentially giving free legal advice to people. Now, it's not supposed to work that way because the ombudsman has a specific role in relation to administration. But I think that over time, it has evolved in that kind of a way where you tend to get that kind of support from persons like that. So my thing is, it hasn't worked largely because our system, Westminster as it is not set up to work in that way. But I do feel that over time we have evolved fixes. I think that what we need to do is institutionalize those fixes to ensure that people have information and support when they need it or when they ask questions. And I think that that's absolutely important. Helping people to understand what, you know, the Republic is, what rights they have within the Republic, and so on. You know, when someone goes to rent a house, and I'm sorry that I keep picking on Farana, but she's my niece, so I can do that. She goes to rent a house dressed as she is, and the person says, we don't have any space, or they make up some kind of an excuse. She needs to know that there is a process whereby she can complain to an authority to get to understand, is this person really discriminating against her, and does that person have the right? The vast majority of Barbadians don't know that they have the right to object to being discriminated against. And I think that's the kind of public education and institutional support. So if you have people inside that can provide support like that, I think that would be a brilliant thing and add on to the process.
Rahana, what more would you like to see in that regard?
I think I would definitely share Peter's thoughts on this. And while he was speaking, you can say, yes, that's exactly right, and that's exactly what happened. But the recourse is slightly different, and I know from experience that persons are often very hesitant to even seek justice on these matters. They prefer to remain silent. They prefer to just fade into the background and not rock the boat because there's a lack of trust in the system and lack of sense of safety in the system as well. So I would definitely say that I agree with Peter's comments there. But I think largely, as I go back to what I said at the beginning, is looking at us as a republic 1 year on and wanting so much for our country to make actual tangible progress on these issues. It's going to take a lot of hard conversations, and sometimes it may entail that we don't necessarily get every single person's opinion on this because it doesn't necessarily affect every single person in the same way. But understanding that if we continue to just part on process, then we will not make progress. And that is the reality of the matter. And sometimes it is a case where we're just allowing inequality to persist because we're just so caught up with feelings on how on a process, and that's it.
And that's a very important point because it comes back to the concern that had been raised earlier by someone who said process has left some people feeling lackadaisical. If people feel as though there's a sense of a lack of justice and a lack of fair play within our systems and stuff like that, it is evident that these things can sap their energy and you know, hurt the ability to motivate and to mobilize those people. So trying to get that aspect of it right, panel, is really something that we need to focus on. as we move forward with this republic. But Gregory, how do you see that?
What David, as a practicing lawyer who engages in a lot of actions against state and state agencies, even to this day, as a sitting government senator, in fact, not advertising, but I mean, our courts have been doing yeoman work in protecting and vindicating and advancing the rights of people in the country. And again, it might be a situation where people in the society are not necessarily following these things, but even in the course of 2022, the government last year went to Parliament and passed amendments to the Bail Act, which took away the right of a citizen to apply for bail for 2 years if they were charged with a firearm offense. The court struck that down. You know, the court struck down this year a 40-year-old piece of legislation that prevented prison officers from organizing themselves as a trade union. The court struck that down as well. 40 years that legislation has been on the books. So that we live in a society in which rights of people are being vindicated by our courts, and the courts are very much more active now because people are willing to challenge things in the courts more so. So for me, I don't take the dystopian view that the society is all bad, all things are going wrong, nothing is going right. We can't be motivated to be civic-minded Barbadians because the government is against us and that kind of stuff. I don't see that as a reality. And again, as I think Tanisha has said it, sometimes people who have the loudest megaphones, who have resort to the various media that are there, they say these things often. They gain currency, and that's not the reality of Barbadians.
You want to hear this? You should therefore hear this comment here from this person. It says, these academics here really don't realize that a lot of Bajans do not use social media for anything other than fun. Most will not use their actual names on Facebook or IG. And what does that tell you?
David,
just let me finish it. The public, just hold on, please. The public here, even academics and professionals, hide to say anything. Like, look at me. I choose to be anonymous. This is who many of us are for several reasons. We are not a new people going into a republic. So we have to deal with reality. This talk of new trends is fine, but sell it to the masses, please, says the writer.
But David, a lot of the assumptions made by this writer, and this is perhaps I could be wrong, but it seems that this is the only person who has made comments in this session so far. A lot of these assumptions are just basically nonsense in my respectful view, right? It's very dismissive of people in their own disciplines, because when you say these academics here really do not realize that a lot of Bajans do not use social media, have they taken a survey? Right? And this pejorative use of these academics is used to dismiss people who have a university education in Barbados, which is something that people in these kinds of forums do. And I reject that because we are Barbadians too, right? And I have family here, brother, sister, mother, all kind of people in Barbados. We live around. We play cricket. We are involved in all kind of organizations and live a reality that is a Barbadian reality. So having a university education does not disable you from being able to engage. And I'm sorry that this one person that you're reading from prescriptively all the time is really using a lot of things that don't make sense. It says to me, people use social media.
I am just pointing out that I am reading what is made available to me. So
but there's only one person you using a lot of unscientific their own notions of what goes on in the world that they live in. And I think I want to speak to defend the two young ladies on the program. They live in a different world than older people who are using this pejorative dismissal of social media and young people. These are the medium young people use, right? And we must not dismiss young people and say that Bajans don't use social media only for fun. That is really dismissive and that is really nonsense, right? And I can't associate with that kind of comment.
All
And to
right,
be
here's another one.
responding to a person,
Here's another one.
and to be responding all the time to this one person spewing this nonsense all the time.
Well, I don't know if it's one person. That's what was being sent to me by the moderator of the chat. This person says, I'm a young Barbadian, 29 years old, and have been noting a trend among fellow youth in my network. The trend has been to some extent a lack of pride in national identity at this stage of our development, driven by factors like underemployment, perceived governance issues, disquiet about perceived lack of meritocracy in the society, etc. As a result, many youth at this point are struggling to lead quality lives now, far less able to think deeply about civics in the society, which many seemingly are disengaged from. They go on to make some other observations, but I think that particular perspective, to what extent how do you see us actually trying to grapple with that point of view, even if it is not in a majority, it may still be enough to merit our attention. So let's come back to you, Ronnie Yearwood. What do you think?
Look, let me just handle. I just want to address the issue that Gregory was raising in terms of social media and fun. I think if you launch a petition and 7,000 people sign, that's not fun. that was active citizenry trying to engage with an issue. And trying to do so via social media. So social media can be used for both. Yes, we know people have fun on social media, but we've also seen the effectiveness of social media in sometimes pushing a government to a different position. When 7,000 people sign something, we know that 7,000 people, the petition that we launched against the name change, that could be translated to 7,000 or at least 4,000 people marching. So there's real power in harnessing social media to translate into actual progressive action against the government. So there's a lesson to be learned from how we can use social media to push government on other issues, and that's what I would say. Now, in terms of the broader question of engagement and how we go forward, the reality is there will always be some people that will be plucked out of the process. And a government's job really, and us here as responsible persons, because all the people here are leaders in their own spaces, we have to use our spaces responsibly, recognize that we have power in our space, and that our messaging has to be careful to the audiences that we engage, the people that either follow us on social media, the people that follow us on Twitter, the people that follow us in our real spaces, as Gregory was trying to describe, whatever it is. And we have to be able to bring them into a society that has been largely apathetic. There are lots of people out there that are not voting. And they're real stats about this. Peter could give you the numbers. These are just real things. This is not something we're thinking. This is not something we've made up. We recognize that people are not engaging, at least by that measure, through voting. So how do we get people to engage, even if they're not in an electoral process, outside of our normal electoral processes? And it's not just young people. I know sometimes we look at young people and we focus on them as this group that's somehow disconnected from society. And I always like to rush the defense of young people on this, because and this is something that I've noticed, and when I engage with young people, it's not that young people are not interested in politics, they're just not interested in politics in the way that it's normally done. So often they will fight for whatever issues they want. They'll fight for women's issues, they'll fight for gender rights issues, they'll fight for better housing, they'll fight for a lot, sometimes what we may consider single politics issues, but they may not go there and vote for a political party. Does that mean they're disengaged? No, they're just engaged in other spaces. The challenge for us, all of us here, and particularly maybe the older folks among us here, how then do we translate their single issue politics into multi-issue politics, that we bring them into the larger process? And I've been given a lot of thought to this, and I'll be honest, I don't have any direct answers about how to do that, and that's something maybe I'll throw to Farah. And I really don't. It's a tricky issue, because then you want that energy, you understand that energy is often directed to a particular cause, and you want them to keep that energy, but then how do you get that energy into other causes? And it's a challenge. It's a challenge not only in Barbados. It's a challenge that I think that we face across the globe. This is nothing unique in terms of voters not trusting their government systems. There's a loss of trust and faith in politics. And how do we bring that back into the space? It's not going to look the same as how we used to. And I think we have to recognize that change is important. And I do agree that we have to stop harping on about the process. I think I made that clear. Even if you didn't like it, we are where we are. Now the question is, how do we build out the new system? And then how do we get more people engaged to build out the new system? You know, as I said, I take my responsibility very seriously. I take that seriously to my membership in terms of getting them involved in the process. And we will be engaging with the Constitutional Commission to do so. I guess the challenge for all of us in our spaces is to get our membership, our family, our friends, or whatever causes we represent, wherever we are, to come into the space and try to build out a better Barbados, because that's the only thing that will work for all of us. The reality is we all live here. This is our country. We have to do best by it, irrespective of political allegiances or if you voted for one party or not another party. You know, there is a point where the issue becomes bigger than the normal kind of party politics, and it spans into what is good for country. Now, at this moment, what's good for Barbados is a modern constitution where the powers of governments are limited, where people have broader says in terms of consultation. I like the point I think Peter was making about the ombudsman, and I would only add, perhaps the model in the UK is one to take. You know, they call it the Citizens Advice Bureau. People is probably familiar with that concept, where people can go for all the type of advice that Peter's talking about, legal advice, housing advice, and we build it out so that there's real advice for citizens who don't normally have a voice and who don't have the resources to go to the other spaces. Because really what we want from the end of this process is empowerment. People have to feel empowered that they can take control of their lives and control of their destinies in their country.
Well, somebody said that in one of the earlier contributions that there was a need to hit the streets to a greater degree and go into homes. You say that the Democratic Labour Party wants to be part of the process. Apart from the statement that you are going to engage with the Constitutional Review Commission, what other initiatives do you all have in mind for assisting?
Well, in terms of engaging, well, part of that engagement would be to talk to our membership to find out what they want the Constitution of the Republic to look like. Because I don't assume to speak to the member, to speak for the membership on such an important issue until I've engaged them and talked to them. So it would be to have the commission come to us, or we go to them, however it works out. So there's a session where the membership can say, look, you know, this is what we want. And then from that, we're able to take and shape a view and say, you know what, this represents the party's position on this. It's one thing for Ronnie Airwood to have a particular view. And everyone, if you followed me on this, you know I have a particular view of what I want the Republic to look like. But that may not be in sync with what the broad membership of the party wants the Republic to look like. And I don't feel it would be right for me to impose or override perhaps their concerns. We can have a debate and we will come to some kind of consensus that we can say, look, you know what, this is a Democratic Labour Party view on this. Some of those views have been emerging over the last year and a half, and we look forward to that consultation. And if it requires us having particular town halls, perhaps assist the commission, you know, Gregory and I can talk about this online. However, the party, like, you know, this is a serious offer. However, the party can assist with this, we are willing to assist as best as we can with the resources that we have. So first step, let's have the conversation with the membership between us and the commission, and then we can go from there.
Tamisha, this entity that you are behind, Future Barbados, I'd like to hear a little bit more about exactly how you are proceeding with this effort to get more young people involved in the process, especially against the backdrop of all the concerns that have been raised out there about funding, especially access to commercial banks and that sort of thing. Young people complain that they can't even open a bank account, and they have all sorts of issues online. They can't transact business online as well as they want to, because there are all types of restrictions. When you look at trying to put something in place for them so that they can feel as though they are part of the forward movement of this society. What exactly do you have in mind?
Thank you for that question. And I want to address the young 29-year-old who sent in a message about the trend in youth. I want you to, first of all, email me at director@futurebarbados.bb, because I would love to have that conversation with you elsewhere and think of some strategies together. But you are not wrong about the lack of pride and identity. We do see it, and the apathy. We do see it even in the innovation space. You would think that young people 21 and 25 are innovative, but we've had to do a lot of work in developing capacity of young people to actually be able to dream and to be able to think beyond the box. Many of the audience may have this problem in their HR spaces where you're finding people but you're not seeing them activate their talent to their maximum potential. And so what we are building in terms of finding talent is we're developing what's called a talent hub. Yes, 400 people applied to our program during our Project Catapult, but we could only take up 25. That means there are 300 plus people and 300 sets of talent that we have not activated. So we're creating this digital space of talent where you can put your profile and be able to get engaged in some of our projects as Future Barbados. And I'll talk about how that works. And these are national development projects and social innovation projects. So wherever you are in the world, Bajan aligned, we can activate your talent. Because you are right, you may make more money outside of Barbados, so you may go outside of Barbados, but at your core, you still want to help the development of your country. So how can we activate you wherever you are in this new gig economy, in this new world of hybrid work, to be actively engaged in that? And that is through what we're going to call our Future of Work portal, where we will do a call for applicants to bring their profile on and engage people wherever their talent pool is. We will be agnostic to degrees, because we believe it doesn't matter your training, because you can be activated in different ways. We have 5 pillars of work that we focus on, which is from the blue economy, Future Blue, Future Green, which looks at the green economy and climate change, Future Safe, which really looks at reducing youth in crime, and to Ronnie's point earlier about activating communities and community organizations, there are examples of restorative justice spaces and places we can start creating at the community level. So that's part of our pilot concepts that we're creating. We have Future Sport, for those of you who see the purpose of sport in building our future and our future and national identity. We also have Future Data, which looks at how do you get data systems to talk to each other. Future Health looks at traditional medicine and how we can use traditional medicine and herbal medicine and create an industry and develop an industry around that for solutions for things like NCDs, which plague our populations. So treatments for our issues to complement lifestyle changes by the medicines that are natural and indigenous to our populations. So what does this mean? We want to help develop businesses, but we're not looking at just the ideas. We're looking at the talent and developing that talent. And also, it is about an ecosystem. There has been over a decade of work done in Barbados around the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We have all the business development organizations who have been trying and being successful to varying degrees in different ways. But there's still systemic issues that are discriminatory towards youth, particularly youth in unconventional jobs and unconventional spaces. Not just those who own businesses, but those who are consultants, those who do not live a 9-to-5 life. We have trouble accessing traditional spaces. So when you talk at the annual Accountants Week, you hope to inspire other conversations for those systemic changes that need to happen. We are looking at creating at supporting the creation of a one-stop MSME hub. So, you have an idea, you have a business, you have a concept, you want to create an app. There is one stop that will helped by AI, artificial intelligence, that will help you navigate the multiple systems of investment, the multiple systems of access, the multiple 5,000 trainings that are existing for you. We know that there's need to break those silos and bring them together, and also to have these difficult conversations that are happening not just here in Barbados but at the global level. A lot of the work we do.
Questions.
Sure.
Because I want to know how long ago this started. to begin with, and I'm curious to find out how it overlaps with all of the other efforts that are made in other ministries.
Um, this is our 1 year anniversary, so we've been working very hard for 1 year. How we overlap with other ministries, it is we've actually partnered with a lot of ministries and spoken to a lot of the ministers. We did present to cabinet directly about not just our concepts, but offered our support to the initiatives that they have, because a lot of ministries are looking for talent themselves and haven't been able to find the right space or the right people. So they have been working alongside us to not only find talent, but develop projects that we can fast track. Our mandate, because we are a project of the government, not an entity, we have a lot of flexibility in how we can operate, because we have to do what can typically take 5 years and 3 election cycles within 6 months to 8 months, because we've challenged ourselves to show that things can be done differently if we just think creatively. We're inspired by colleagues in Rwanda and how Rwanda has transformed their economy despite their financial challenges. We're inspired by the work of X, which is Google's R&D factory. We're inspired by Nesta, which is the social innovation agency of the United Kingdom government. So this happens elsewhere. We just believe that it can happen here in Barbados. And the access to funding, we always think it's a deficit, but it's also a positive for us because money exists globally. How can we create Barbados as that attractive space for investments in social innovation? It's what's at our core of what we do, because we believe if we can show that we can get money to invest, then we can help push the markers for regulatory spaces. We can push the boundaries for innovation in traditional spaces, because everybody is scared that it's a money thing. But we are finding investors and partners who are willing to give us that fodder and give us that support, so we can then challenge these systemic issues again at the end of the day.
All right, thank you very much. At least we got an opportunity to hear a little bit more about that. Obviously, we have to pursue it with you further on another occasion. But I come back here to some of the final questions that may be coming up at you. This person identifies himself as Adrian, and he says democracy is messy, it is hard, it's never easy. I think he was quoting Robert Kennedy Jr. Goes on to say that what we have seen resulting from COVID-19 is a rise in authoritarian approach to governance, with citizens calling on their democratic governments to be more punitive towards fellow citizens who are hesitant or outright against vaccinations. I see a similar approach in the current march to republicanism. It seems to me that there is an impatience and an unwillingness to engage people in this process, perhaps because it can become messy, long, and drawn out. But what is the point of building out your democracy if the people are not intimately involved? For whom is it being done? Not the people? Ronnie, you see, you want to put your support behind the government in this regard, the government's effort. But I suppose I can ask you whether you don't run the risk of appearing as though you too are part of this authoritarian approach that he speaks about. The impatience, the unwillingness.
I understand the writer's concern. I understand their comment. And I think, however, saying that you are willing to be part of a process to have a new constitution does not label us as part of that process. The reality of it, there's a responsibility that you have to have as a leader and as an opposition party to shape out the country. It would be highly irresponsible of me to not participate in a process which would make Barbados better. And I think you have to always be very wary of salting the earth that you want to inherit. And I think it is something that the last government was not wary of. I don't intend to do the same thing as opposition, as I've called and said, we need a new politics, so we need to do things slightly differently. If there are things that we can contribute to, we will contribute to. When there are things that I don't think are right and are not good for the country by my analysis, I make that very clear. But in terms of the constitutional process, there's always been an approach on both sides to engage in trying to shape a better Barbados. We will put our ideas on the table. At the end of it, the government will present the draft constitution. If we think that that draft is lacking in pushing the democracy in the space that we need it to go, we will make that clear. We will make the necessary points for amendments, and we will see where we go from there. But at this particular moment, you give everybody a chance, and we're given a chance to see what that final process will look like and what that final draft document will look like. I would hope, and I'm saying this to Commissioner Nichols right here, direct straight to him. I would hope that he does not, and they do not bring back that 1998 draft constitution, because we know that needed work. It does not go as far as we would like it to go. And since then, Barbados and the world has changed so much. There's so many things that did not address, and it would be a disappointment. It would be a letdown if they just come back with that, brushed off, polished up a few things, where we can do so much better for this country and for the people, and to try to paint out that modern Barbados that we all want.
But while a lot of the focus will be on the administration as we look towards the building of the Republic, there are those people who would also be looking at what is the Democratic Labour Party going to become? How is it going to be refashioned to make a more significant contribution to the Republic of Barbados? What is new that people may be able to expect from a political party that has been as old as yours is, and has made the kind of contribution that it did to Barbados over the years? So people are looking to see whether you two are reshaping and revamping. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, that's a fair and that's a good question. It's not even a hard question. It's a right question to ask. And I have told my party this. I've told everyone this. I think to change the country, you have to change the party. There is no way that we can convince Barbados that we are willing to change Barbados if we're not willing to change ourselves. And I've seen government after government after government make promises about changing Barbados and doing these amazing things and do nothing. And furthermore, they do not change themselves. How do you think people are going to trust you when your party and all the political parties across the region, let's be realistic, are archaic, are not transparent, they're not open? There's no sense of normal accountability. Even the candidate selection process, sometimes you don't even know what the rules are. You don't know what the criteria are. I'm probably one of the first leaders who made it clear there's an open call for candidates, and I will release a whole process so everybody's clear what you're being judged on. That's how you do modern. That's how modern political parties are.
Well, let me ask you this question. I mean, people point to the ministerial leadership and stuff. You look at the Democratic Labour Party, and I suppose Peter can give his own assessment to what extent does it appear as though it is more of the same? It looks as though you're shaping up another maximum leader concept. Is that what Barbados needs, as far as you're concerned? Is there nothing else to this particular approach as you look towards this republic?
It isn't what Barbados needs. I think what we need is a sense of leadership. At the top, obviously, there's always a singular leader, but that leader has to be surrounded by a party and a team that can tell them when to come back, when to say, you've gone too far, or that's a line that you shouldn't cross, or that's something that you shouldn't do. And that is a sense of the culture that you're trying to develop. That takes time, because the reality is Barbadians and our politics is usually accepting, and it is a form of a maximum leader. That's what people are used to. If you want to build out something new and try something different, it's gonna take a little bit of time. And not only that, it takes a lot of cultural change to say, you know what, I'm going to talk to you about the decisions that I'm making. I'm not just going to make them. We're going to have an internal conversation, and I'm going to go back, and there's a loop, and there's a feedback. And all of this is a little bit different because sometimes, I'll be honest, people expect you to do that maximal leader thing. They expect you to just come and do what you're going to do. And they're a little bit shocked when you say, actually, let's have a conversation. I want to hear what you as the rank and file are saying about X and Y. And that's why I made that point about even the approach that we're taking to the Constitutional Commission before a report is written or the parties' final submissions are made. The commission, I want our membership to engage with them in that one-on-one dialogue, and then from that we can frame a contribution. Normally, I'm sure in other forums, parties would just make submissions, and the rank and file would not even know because it would just come from the executive or a few at the top, and the party's name is on it. That is not the approach I'm taking. I'm trying to do things differently, and it's a lot about culture change as well, because maybe people aren't just used to this. But as I said, if you want to demonstrate that you can change the country, you have to show that you can change the party, and the party is changing, and they're going to try different things. And as some of the panelists said, sometimes things work, but you got to be willing to, and sometimes they don't, but you got to be willing to try something new. There's
Peter,
no way until you do it.
Yeah, no, I was intrigued when you asked Ronnie to tell us a bit about how the DLP was doing things differently, because the consultative process, certainly would start there, and he's indicated that the DLP plans to have an internal before they have an external process, and I'm anxious to hear how that process is going. How it will go, how it will turn out, and if it's going to be fundamentally different from anything else that we know before. But I just want to say that this process of consultation is difficult. If you consult too much, you're going to be told that you're bothering people with unnecessary and useless information. If you consult too little, you're going to be told something different. I'm reading the comments and so on, and the belief that in some instances people think it's being shoved down people's throat. And I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it, because the kind of conversation we are having in terms of constitutional reform is not consistent with that. But yet still there are some suggestions that people are jaded, they're not coming out because of the COVID thing. That COVID thing, I heard in all of the different Caribbean islands, everybody was saying the same thing, that government was dictatorial and autocratic and whatnot, when government was trying to manage a pandemic, which was really very challenging. But yet still I'm being told, subsequently, and in conversations like this, that has jaded people's reaction to these things. So, there's a point at which you have to say, let's do the best that we can to create the consultative environment. But ultimately, it's going to have to come down to a decision that has to be made at some point to say, okay, we've had a conversation. This is the kind of model we're going to go with. The other thing I think that we need to be careful about is the number of loop scanners that we have in Barbadian society that are putting things on the table and suggesting that they're legitimate considerations. I listened with some concern to a pretty well-known and respected commentator in Barbadian society making a contribution at the previous consultation, which frankly comes down to discrimination on the basis of religious belief. And my thing is, with the best will in the world, if that is majority opinion, it cannot be contemplated in terms of our constitutional reform process. Somebody will have to say at some point in time is like, I get you feel this way. I think it's unfortunate you feel this way, but we can't do it because we have a bit of rights that's supposed to protect minorities. And you can't go down the road of saying that you want to take a position that because this is a majority Christian society, that the person who is of an Islamic faith cannot practice and cannot dress consistent with their religious belief. This is the kind of thing that we also have to be guarded about, because you're going to get a lot of people who are coming with ideas which you cannot contemplate in terms of this process. I just wanted to get that on the table as well.
Thank you very much,
Peter, I'd like to join.
And
Peter,
brief comment from you.
join.
Yes, a brief comment. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'd like to just join Peter as saying that I actually sat on Sunday in shock and horror at the gentleman's comments, and I really don't know how to. I think, listen, I come from a family where my in-laws are Muslim, all right, and my children go to a Muslim home and they see their grandparents. And it is difficult for me to fathom that kind of bigotry coming from somebody who's so well respected. But it's part of the parcel of what Adrian has said in the chat here as the messy details that we have to go through. You see, Barbados has never had a broad plebiscite where we are building out a constitution. When we went to independence, there was no discussion. We went there. When we removed the CCJ, the government passed the legislation and we went there. Right? This is the first time that we're talking about building a new constitution and not just tinkering or reforming something by way of minor changes. So we scrap all the old models, everything is on the table, listen to what people say, and the hard part is going to come when we have to discuss what the people are saying, simulate it, and mold it into a fashionable thing that we can put for the government. I really it looks daunting, but it is worthwhile because I always say Barbados is worth the effort, and I want to commend Ronnie for that. We listen, not only the Democratic Labour Party, but I may have my views about tinkering with the political system or making changes in the political system so we can have something similar to what obtains in countries where we have free coexisting branches and co-equal branches of government, where the executive is different from the legislature, as obtains in the US. Do we want that? Can we afford that? Do we have the capacity to sustain the natural shocks and tendencies that occur in that kind of system, as opposed to the stability that we have had in Barbados? As I said, we freely change governments in Barbados when we do not like the government, and that has worked. So these are messy details that are important, but I'm really enthused by the ennobling position that Ronnie has taken. They're going to contribute to the discussion, and I want to say I look forward to ICAB, who has hosted us here this evening, and thanks again to really making an in-depth contribution in relation to the chapter on finance in the Constitution, because that has been a part of the Constitution that has escaped after the earlier reforms and amendments at all. So these are things that we are looking forward to. And Ronnie, I don't think we'll disappoint you. In terms of the submissions we've seen from the Barbadian public so far, in terms of third and fourth generation rights, that we actually doing a training session on Saturday on these things, because we also have to be educated about them as we get into our own internal deliberations. We're having a training session on Saturday being conducted by Professor Tracy Robinson, and we will have some more from some overseas people. So apart from going out to the public, we are also doing our own homework and making sure that we are up to date with a lot of the constitutional discourse as it operates all over the world. So I assure you in that exercise.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists all. Senator Gregory Nichols, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, Peter Wickham, Tamaisha Eitel, and Farhana Bulbulia. And also a special thank you to ICAB for mounting this discussion on Barbados the Republic 1 year on. I'm David Ellis. Do have a good night. Thank you all.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.